everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPad 2nd generation and see how this particular iPad holds up in 2025. Now, number one, I will definitely tell you, this iPad is still a very interesting iPad to say the least. It may not be an iPad I would recommend really anybody to buy, but this was a very interesting iPad when it first came out because it really was a pretty solid upgrade coming from the 1st generation iPad. So we'll take a look at this iPad throughout this whole entire video. First things first though, if you want to pick up an iPad that I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description below. You can get that from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of both these particular, or just this particular iPad, since we're taking a look at one iPad right now, this iPad on the front side was giving you a very big 9.7-inch IPS LCD panel. Now, this type of panel for the most part, I think is like a pretty decent, interesting looking panel to say the least. Like, it's really not like a terrible panel. This thing looks pretty good. And I do think if you are going to go through and pick up a panel and pick up a device, this thing is actually not that bad of an option. This thing is, a IPS LCD panel. It's 768 by, 1024. So definitely is not the best looking screen. It definitely could have been a little bit of a better panel when it first came out too, but it's not terrible either. Like, I do think this type of screen, this type of panel, it's good enough and it gets the job done. But you also have to remember that this type of panel, when it does kind of come down to it, there's a situation where you have so much bezel around this whole entire display. So that right there could end up kind of giving you some sort of issues and some sort of problems, right? Like, this definitely is not the best looking display of all time. You're having a lot of bezel around it. So this is just an archaic looking device. That's why I want to start by saying that this panel, although it's nice in some ways for how old it is, it really is not a good looking panel nowadays. This thing is 14 years old, so keep that in mind. On the bottom of this iPad, you're getting that original 30-pin connector. So this thing was that original 30-pin connector. You plug it into your computer. That's kind of all you're getting. And then you're getting the headphone jack as well. So when you are getting a panel like that, that is one of those big things to keep in mind here, because with this type of phone, you're getting a phone that is you're getting a tablet that's pretty outdated, like I mentioned before. So that right there is another one of those big things to kind of keep in mind there too. On top of that, this type of iPad, you're also basically going through and still maintaining, your aluminum back on the backside. You're getting a single camera setup on the backside as well, which is also nice. I like getting those single cameras, but that's kind of all you're getting here, right? There's not really anything else like super insane going on here either. It's a pretty basic type of, layout. Now, there's a lot of things that this iPad is missing out on that a lot of iPads have in this day and age. Number one, you are getting big bezels on the front side. That's kind of a big deal for me personally. So, you're going to have to constantly deal with that if you're looking at this type of iPad. Number two is that the cameras on this thing are a little bit outdated as well. At least it has cameras. That is one thing that I kind of like about it. But that right there is another thing you might run into here if you're going to go through and buy this type of device. On top of that, another big thing, you're also going to be missing out on things like a ProMotion display, so no 120 Hz, no USB Type-C port on the bottom of this iPad as well. So you're going to be missing out on a USB Type-C port, which is already kind of a downside. It's kind of already a disadvantage there. If you were to, I would probably have had recommended getting a device that would have probably been giving you a little bit of a better experience when it comes down to that side as well. So I think when you kind of look at this iPad from that side, it does kind of miss out on a lot of different things. And personally for me, like I mentioned before, if I was to go through and pick up a device, it would be really nice to buy an iPad that would be giving me a better experience from that side. Unfortunately, this iPad isn't really going to be giving me that great of an experience. And that's kind of the problem that you're going to be running into when you are getting that type of iPad when it comes down to it. So, like I said before, personally for me, if I'm getting an iPad, that's kind of the problem that I'm running into here. Beyond that though, when you are taking a look at this iPad, some other big things to keep in mind is that this iPad is also still going through and giving you the cameras. So this was technically, I think, the first iPad that brought any cameras inside of it. And that was always something that was very interesting because we were able to go through and buy these types of iPads and get a pretty solid experience for the most part, right? This camera on the back was a 0.7 megapixel camera on the back side, and then it's also giving you a VGA camera on the front side. So that was actually something that was very, very interesting. Being able to go through and get that type of camera was a big deal at that moment, but here's the biggest thing you're going to have to keep in mind. This camera is already outdated by the time you buy it. It's outdated by like 30 to 40, times of what we already have. The cameras like this day and age are so much better, so much higher megapixel count, much better looking cameras, much higher resolution. This camera, I don't even know if you can film videos with it. Like, it's a very, very outdated camera. The camera nowadays, you can film videos, you can do, I think, cinematic mode. I mean, there's so much capability with the lenses we have nowadays. These types of cameras are definitely outdated when it comes down to it. So keep that in mind. It's not supposed to be like the biggest deal in the world, but that is one thing you're going to have to keep in mind when you're going to go through and like pick up one of these types of devices. So from that side too, that kind of covers it up there. There's not really that much more to hit on when it comes down to the camera side. One of the biggest issues though that you are probably going to run into is probably with the software. This is the biggest problem for me. And if I'm going to go through and pick up an iPad, this is going to be the number one thing that I would look at and be very kind of upset about buying this type of iPad because of the performance of the cameras. This camera is already outdated. Sorry, not the camera. The software is already outdated. This thing is going to be giving you, basically started off with iOS 4. It's going to be going up to iOS 9.3.5, and that's it, right? It stopped at iOS 9. It's not getting any more versions of software. That is essentially the problem that you're going to be getting when you're running into this type of iPad. What would be the point of buying an iPad like this if it's already outdated with software, right? There's nothing to look forward to with this iPad anymore. There's substantially better iPads out there. And that's kind of the problem that you're running into, once again, if you're going to go through and pick up this type of device. So in my personal opinion, that right there is also another big thing to keep in mind. Again, it's not really like the biggest deal in the world, but that is going to be one of those things that you're going to look at and be like, well, like I have nothing else to look forward to within this iPad because everything is already outdated. So that right there is another very big thing to keep in mind there too. On top of that, when it comes down to the chipset, when it comes down to the performance, this device is going to be giving you the Apple A5 chip inside of it with 512 megabytes of RAM. So this is also one of those things to keep in mind here too. With the RAM side and with the performance side, this type of, the capability behind this type of lens is not terrible, right? Like I do think this type of camera, it's pretty good. This performance, why do I keep saying camera? The performance of this tablet isn't really terrible for a 14-year-old iPad if you think about it, but without a doubt, this is definitely by far not an iPad that I would recommend people to buy anymore. Once again, the reason for that is because this iPad is just, it's just outdated. It just doesn't have that much more going for us, and you're just going to be running into too many problems within this type of device. And there's a lot of other iPads I would recommend buying. This definitely is not one of them, especially when it comes down to the performance side as well. So overall, to kind of sum up this whole entire video, I think number one, this iPad is definitely a legendary iPad. I think it brought a lot of stuff to the table, but it just would not be an iPad I would recommend anyone to buy. And the reason for that is because this iPad is already running into some software problems. It's already outdated when it comes down to the security side, and that's why I really would not recommend people buying this iPad anymore. It's outdated when it comes down to the software, and I would hate for people to go ahead and buy this type of iPad if it is already outdated with software. That's kind of the problem that we're running into here. So overall, there's way better iPads to buy. Think of the iPad, Pro first generation. I recommend that even more than this thing. Any of the iPad Pros that came out in the last 3-4 years, iPad Airs. The iPad Air 4 I think is a really good iPad, and I'd recommend buying that one over this one any day of the week. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.